Right, so welcome to the Straight Talking Property podcast. Today we've got special guest Craig Phillips. Those of you might originally know him from the series Big Brother back 21 years ago. We've got Immanuel, Ezekiel, Craig, obviously our special guest, and myself, Jimmy London. So, Craig, how are we doing?
I'm very well, thanks, Jimmy. It's all good. Can't complain.
Good. So, I'm going to start it off with, because it's the one question that obviously started your career. Big Brother, tell us a quick snippet. I know it was 21 years ago, but tell us a quick snippet of what it was like and did you expect to be where you are now from Big Brother?
I certainly didn't, Jimmy. No, not at all. I mean, 20 odd years ago when I walked into that house, I wasn't really expecting much from it because you got to remember nobody had ever heard of Big Brother before. So for me, I was quite happy and content running my building company for 10 years before that. I went on the show to try and help a young lady who needed a heart and lung transplant. So I was trying to win the money, of course. Not in my wildest dreams did I ever think I would it would evolve the show as big as it was. And I would get to where I am from it, 21 years later, and I'm still as busy as ever. So it's been great.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, there's not many people can say that they started in a Big Brother house 21 years ago and is still in the public eye. I mean, you're still out there, it's amazing, when we knew you was coming on the show, of what you've done from your journey from 21 years and it's just fantastic. I mean, you've appeared on over 850 TV shows.
Yeah. A lot more than that now. Actually, I think we tried to do a count up, after about 12 years. And I think we topped it over 1,000 TV programs then. And that was mainly for the BBC and ITV. And then we had a lot more Sky programs as well, which of course go around the world and around Europe on there. So it did add up to over thousands. Yeah, it has really been... It's just been a whirlwind, really. I've, met a lot of other Big Brother housemates from years after me, who have won it and things. And I don't think they had the kind of success. They're probably better presenters than me, better looking than me, could probably talk better than me on TV and things. But I think the key to my success is I had the building trade background before I went in. So after winning the program, that catapults you up there for your profile. But if you haven't got something to give back to the channels, and at the time, makeover programs, property programs were quite a hype then, So I think I managed to cement my kind of foundations in that genre to work on TV and online as well, on the internet too.
I think you're playing yourself down, Craig. You're a really likable, lovable guy. It's easy to talk to, easy to listen to. You're very good on camera.
That's kind, Immanuel. Thank you.
And I had a small claim for fame on TV, but I certainly wasn't anywhere as good as you. One program and I'm out.
What was that? What program was it?
That was Rich House, Poor House.
Okay, yes.
A couple of seasons ago. So yeah, that was a good experience. But you really are a real character. You were a character 21 years ago. I've watched you during that show. And you've just grown from that. So, and you've stayed grounded, which is what people like.
Oh, thank you. That's nice. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah.
What are you doing currently in property? Are you investing in your own properties? Are you developing out? What are you doing specifically in property right now?
In a kind of a nutshell, my whole property portfolio, it first started for me back in about probably 1995, 96. I bought my first cottage. And that was an old derelict one that was run down, needed a lot of work doing on it. And me personally, I was living in a caravan outside with no electric, no water, no gas in there. I'd go to the supermarket to get a shave and brush my teeth in the morning. So I was going out to work every day and then coming home and working on my own house, trying to make it livable, So that was my first major investment I did. And that was in Newport, Shropshire area. And then I started to carry on running my building company, start looking around. Is there any other opportunities of property investment? I always knew that it was the direction that I was going in. Although I was building my building company up and doing properties and renovations for other people, I always thought, well, it's a good retirement plan for me to try and put whatever I earn into property. And I wasn't earning that much at the time, but I just shopped around, tried to buy the right places, run down ones where I could get at a cheaper rate and invest the time and effort into them. So I think I got two more cottages. I got another cottage and a terraced house all before I went on Big Brother. So we had three of them then. And then what I found was coming out after Big Brother, that was a whirlwind for the first 2 or 3 years. I couldn't buy any more property then because I didn't have any time to dedicate to them, of course. And it got to about 2003. And then the way it worked with the BBC and ITV, when I had a particular series running, it may run for 14 weeks and then stop. And I may not be back on TV again for another 10 or 12 weeks. So for me, I'd think, okay, well, that time I've got off, get down to the auctions, find the most rundown property as possible, ones that you couldn't get a mortgage or anything against. You couldn't lend money against them. They were in such a poor shape. But for me, they were perfect because I could get them at the right price. I knew I could strip it right down to the bare brickwork, and replace the whole roof structures, every bit of timber inside the building, and then modernize them the way I wanted them. So they were perfect for me. And it was great that I could then do the trade that I loved, which is the building work, but carry on keeping my hands in doing the building work, but on my own properties, So that's how it kind of came about for me as being a property investor. And I remember I purchased this one in 2003 from an auction, and it was a grade 2 listed building. It had 19 rooms in there, 4 stories high, and it was a beautiful looking building on the outside. Excuse me, internally it was in poor shape. So I knew I did have to do a lot of work on it. So when I bought that one, I think I only paid something like £45,000 for it, because it was in that type of property area where no one, unless you were in the building industry and was able to, be able to throw £300,000 or £400,000 at it, if you didn't have that cash available, you couldn't lend that. And you didn't know much about property, you wouldn't go anywhere near this type of property because it would be a real pitfall, and you could easily get yourself into trouble trying to develop it. But for me, I looked at it as a real big challenge. And I said to myself, well, okay, I've bought this, I've committed to it. I'm going to do it up possibly in stages. I'm going to turn it into 4 luxury apartments. And for me, we just set up our own television production company as well. So I went to one of the major channels to say, I bought this grade 2 listed building. It was built in 1853. It's beautiful. It's got lots of potential. I said, what about if we produce a 10-part TV show, following me, renovate it all, from plans right the way through to completion. So at the time on Discovery Home and Leisure, they said, yeah, it's great. We like the idea of it. What's your kind of, we like the idea of the build, the nature of the build, the historical element to it. What's the kind of storyline to it? And for me, Liverpool had been shortlisted for the Capital of Culture at the time. I think this is in about 2004, but it wasn't until 2008 until it was obviously decided whether
That's a real shocker, isn't it?
Yeah. And I said, okay, well, let's do the 4 different flats. It's 4 different luxury apartments to tie in the themes in and around the cultures of Liverpool, because we did a maritime theme, of course, because we got all the docklands, etc. And then we did one design in there was a music and arts, of course, because we've got the Beatles and all that type of art side of things to it. And then the last one, we were trying to come to one was an industrial theme as well, because we've had all the industrial side of Camelades and even Vauxhall Motors and things like that, was quite big and worldwide famous to Liverpool. So we did the 3 themes, and then the 4th one, I was kind of thinking, what can we do a design around this? And I got one of the BBC designers to kind of work with me and help me. And we looked at Liverpool and thought, well, Liverpool's got a good future. It's a good future for investors, and it's got a good future just in general, whether you're a student here, a resident, or a visitor, it's got a great vibe. So we did the 4th flat in there as a futuristic one and just designed everything white in there, from white floors, walls, ceilings, white furniture, the lot. It was quite clinical looking, but it worked well for a TV program. And for me, it was quite a real big challenge because I was purchased a house bigger than I'd ever owned before. I was personally funding it. I was also had the pressure of being the first exec producer on one of my own programs. I'd helped produce programs or small items on a day or two show, but I'd never really directed producers and then become an exec producer to deliver a 10-part show that a TV channel is paying, for, sort of thing. So it was a big challenge for me, but it kind of really gave me the taste for it. It was about a 12, 14-month project all in all, because I still had some of my other TV commitments I had to keep pulling off and coming back on too. But we got stuck into this house. We did it all, and it turned out fantastic. But I loved working on them buildings and felt they were a good investment. I ended up buying the house next door to it, which was a 21-room house. So we'd done the same to that, converted it into 4 luxury apartments. Excuse me. And then it got to 2005 or 6, I think it was. And the house next door to that one, so I've got numbers 2 and number 3. We've now got 8 apartments there, all to a really nice high spec inside them. The original number 1 house was bombed in 1944 in the Second World War. Now was just a plot of land. So I spoke to the conservation planners and said, I want to put an application in here. And I own the land. I'd already purchased the land at this point. It had 9 garages on, I think, at the time. I said, we want to flatten them. We want to rebuild the house. All the facial features exactly the same as the houses next door. But internally, I want to build it a little bit differently. We don't have to have the ceilings as high, etc. And we come with a compromise with the planners, and we managed to get 5 apartments out of it. So we set the task of we first got the machines in. We had to get a bomb specialist in to come and scan the floor to see that there was nothing in there that hadn't detonated back in the 40s. And to see it was all safe, that we could get in with the machines, and we dug it all out, and literally we built a 28-room house in there. But the facial features, it just looks like it has been there since 1853. Luckily, because I own the buildings next door, we could make molds, and we got someone in to help me doing all these molds on the actual facial features. And then we casted all them and set them all ourselves, built it in, obviously, a basic block, and bedded all the molding in right the way up. And it looked brilliant. So I really got the desire for, one, the property investment, but ones where I knew that I was putting my own stamp to it and taking it from completely derelict, or if nothing there, and building it up to make it a great sustainable home to live in for someone,
So let me ask you a question, Craig, because I develop as well. And as a developer, nothing ever really goes according to plan. So let me ask you a question.
That's right.
On the first 2 that you bought, which is effectively a refurbishment model,
yes,
just to help people in the audience, you said you bought it for around about 45,000. You spend around about 300,000 on it.
Yeah.
You convert it into 4 flats. What was the overall GDV, gross development value, and what complications did you find on either of those 2 that you hadn't foreseen when you first looked at it?
Okay, yes. I think overall, I paid 45.5 for it on number 3 in Oak Terrace. We spent about, I think, 340 on that. So it kind of owed me about 385 all in all. I would say it took about 12 to 14 months of my time, which you never get paid for, of course, until you come to sell them further down the line. So taking that into account, and then we got it valued. I think Lloyd's valued it around about the 2004 or 5 mark. I think they valued it for mortgage purposes, and they valued it at 675 back in then. It would have carried on going up a little bit, and then took quite a tumble around the 2009 mark, which most things did at that point. But I think now today, we still have the properties today. We've got 13 apartments on that block that we rent out, and yeah, they're all still good. They're all still certainly show profit, in them. That's for sure. The house number 2, it was quite an unusual one for that, because I've got a lady who lives in there at the moment, Mrs. Green, who lived in, her and her husband lived in number 2 all of their lives. And sadly, Mr. Green's passed away now. He passed in his late 80s. Edie is she'll be close to 90 years of age now, who's still a tenant of mine. So I'd done a deal with her to say, listen, you and your husband, your health isn't in the best of shape. The house is practically derelict. You live it in. You've seen what I've done next door. I tell you what, I'll purchase the house off you. I'll give you a lifetime rent in a luxury apartment to whatever spec that you require. And then basically I own the building type of thing. So we come across, a very trustworthy deal in there, which, it's still perfectly standing today after whatever 15 years on. And so I purchased that house, I think it just, testing my memory now, I think about 85,000 in a derelict state, but it was valued at about 170 at the time from a local estate agent here in one of the big auctioneers here in Liverpool. So we knew there was value in the property. they were in a catch 22 position. They couldn't afford to renovate it. They couldn't afford to do much, in fairness, but just barely live in it, and it wasn't healthy for them living in it. The heating was bad. It was damp. There was everything going wrong with it, and them big old houses, as you know yourself, they're very difficult to work on and expensive. So what we did was I purchased it off them for half the value of what the estate agent said it was. They went to live next door into the fully renovated ones. They lived in there, I think, for about 7 or 8 months till I completely re-renovated it all. And we run into a few structural problems. One of your questions was about what type of hurdles, do you run into at the time? What we'd experienced, if you picture these big terraced houses, which you all see 4 stories up here, where number 1 was bombed in the war, when them mortars had come down and flattened it, what we hadn't realised was the impact of that going through a building into the ground. It shunted the gable end of number 2. And it wasn't until we got scaffolding right the way up the side of it, you're talking 12 metres high here, and dropped a bit of a plumb level line down, we realised the base of it was pushing out a fraction. So I had to take a whole gable end of that down. So before you know it, you've done your valuations of all the work that's required on there. And then all of a sudden that whole gable end has got to come down, and it was a solid 9-inch wall. Yourself, in them days, there was no sand and cement. It was all lime mortar in the joint. So it come down very easily, but structurally it wasn't sound at all, which led us then to, I think I ended up purchasing or hiring about 280 acro bars, and myself working with a structural engineer and about 7 scaffolders. We spent about a week propping it all up and building this big scaffolding frenzy at the side just to try and drop this gable end down, clean up the brick and rebuild it all back up again. So straight away, it put the job behind 6 weeks, probably easily cost another £25,000 worth of manpower time and even drawings, etc., to try and get it all right. And yourself, once you start pulling things apart to that extent, it opens a can of worms. So before you knew it, every paling that was all up in the top, all the big old Queen's trusses in some of the roof areas, all then thought, they, all rotted where they were in there. Now we've got it to this level, take off the whole roof, strip all them down, replace them all with metal RSJs, and then it's cranes. And all of a sudden, where you have a bit of a 5% contingency plan of costs of materials and labour, all of a sudden that's gone. And you're now looking, the cost of this build is going to be 15% more than we anticipated, and you've got to have a good relationship with the bank manager when you get into a bit sticky water like that. So going back to it, I think I paid 85k for it. And then we spent probably about 380 on the refurbishment all in on that one to get my 4 apartments. And then again, that was valued again 18 months after number 3 Oak Terrace. So I think it didn't go much more in value, probably about another 20,000 more, I'd say. I think it was, but it was 18 months later. So I'd expected my existing house next door would have gone up more or less the same on that. So, pound for pound, it was certainly worth an investment for me in there. We just rent out 3 apartments at the minute there now, and he still lives in one himself,
So can I just break down a couple of bits for the people? Because there's a lot of stuff that you've said in there that I think just needs unlocking slightly. So the first thing that you did, it was a very creative strategy by doing a deal with the owner. And a lot of people will know the strategy that you've done, which is called a reversionary mortgage. So you've allowed somebody to live in their home. You've bought it effectively for a discounted price at 50%. They stay in it. And because you're giving the mortgage, so that's why you've got the discount on it.
Yes.
Secondly, in terms of the work that you've done, and I'm doing a pub conversion at the moment, I'm going through exactly what you're going through now, and we're adding another mansard roof. So in terms of contingency, that's where a lot of people fall over when it comes to building work. So new build is very different to refurbishment work, and the normal 5 or 10% isn't normally sufficient on a refurb, as it would be maybe 20, 25, 30% even sometimes for a refurbishment work. So those are 2 really great stories. Now, the one next door, which is a new build, I'd love to hear the story in that, because they're 2 different animals, right? A refurbishment is very different to a new build. And sometimes you think a new build can be a lot easier. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. So really like to know the story on that and what you created there.
Sure, yeah. The new build certainly was a lot easier for us. We had a clear playing field there, once we got it all excavated out. We were going down into the basement level as well. So we were going down, I think, about 4.2 meters all in all to put the slab down the bottom and build off that one. And that one shot up in 9 months. We had it almost livable within 9 months, besides decorating work and things. Excuse me. So that one went really to plan. Cost-wise, you'd be surprised at this one. I paid for the land testing me now, £25,500 for the land. It didn't have any planning permission on it, so it was a bit of a risk for me. It only had the 9 garages on there. But we did have a good relationship with the conservation planners. They were really pleased with how I refurbished the 2 buildings next door. They had the trust and faith in me that I could deliver something, on par with those. And we certainly did. So for me, it was the biggest house I've ever built. And that turned out to be a 28-room house on that one. And we got 5 apartments in there. And I personally lived on the top floor of that one as well for a further 4 years, I think. 4 more years till I moved out to that one. And I got help in with the building team around me. Hodgkinson Builders I used in Derbyshire at the time. A good friend of mine, he has a big team of bricklayers. So he sent down, I think, about 12 guys with me. And it flew up because it was all built with a 9-inch solid block. And then we cladded the outside of it in areas with insulation to bring it up to the spec that they required. And we stepped out all the kind of the dental work and all the detailed work on the front fasciade, what the conservation planners wanted. So it was a dream to work on, in fairness, where the other 2 next door on the refurbishment, as much as I love the challenge, I've got to say they were a headache. They really were a headache. And, and I love the challenge. But if I was asked to, what would I want to do again? Would I want to do the refurb or would I want to do the rebuild? On the new one, I'd opt for the rebuild one every time, yeah.
Okay. Give us some of the numbers on the new build in terms of you bought it for 20 odd grand.
New build, 25 for the land itself. Probably about 10,000 straight away with all the plans and the architect's plans and structural engineers drawings. So I was in about 35 before I'd even put the machine in the ground. And then the overall build, what did I settle down on now? I think I had only 340 set aside on the new build, but I did end up spending, I think, about 4. I probably spent about 4 on it. And that was a typical thing of when I knew I was going to be living it in myself, I wanted to spend a little bit more on the overall internal bits. I went over the top a little bit more, probably another 20-odd thousand on the refurb. And then I just wanted to try and upgrade it a little bit better with underfloor heating and various things, because we knew the other properties had gone up quite a significant value and we were renting them out and we were getting good tenants in them. We've got a local hospital by us. So, excuse me, we had doctors and nurses in there. I thought, I'll keep these to a nice high spec. And I think I'd probably spent just on 400,000 then on the new build, but I got the 5 apartments out of there. And then I think Lloyd's valued the new build. When did I finish that? 2010. I think it was it 685 or 695? I think it was 685. 685 and probably owing me about 435 all in all, maybe.
So again, if I can just unpack that a little bit for other people, because there's different stages. So one is that you did a conversion. This is a new build, and you had a risk on the new build because you had to go through planning. So most people, when they go through planning, they want a planning uplift on the land. So you could have sold it on once you got planning and not built it yourself. So you had an intrinsic value from getting the planning permission.
Yes.
And at the end of it, there was sufficient profit, if, as you say, to keep it and refinance it and keep it. So in the trade for the average person, we call it BRR, or BRR, which is buy, refurbish, refinance. And on all 3, you've done all of that. You've bought it, you've refurbished it, and at the end of it, you refinanced it, pulled all your money back out and recirculated to go again. So that's what we call utopia, where you find a property that's, you can add value, refurbish it, refinance and go again. So you've done that on all 3. You've definitely shown your knowledge, your expertise, what you're good at. So in terms of what you do, if somebody was going to get started and do something like you're doing, because it's a great story, you're doing it and you're doing it ongoing, besides all the fame that you've had, it's you've done it on the back of your trade and your knowledge.
Yes.
How would you say somebody would like to maybe start with what you did? How you think they might start?
Yeah, I think certainly not start with a house as big as ambitious as the ones I did, that's for sure. Depending on their experience in building or self-building or DIY, even I meet many people who are homeowners, have a fair bit of collateral in their house, and find they have a little bit of time with whatever business or life they do. So they're wanting to think of a second home, whether it's for rental purposes or to just simply do it up and sell it straight on, and they often ask me, what sort of advice would I give them on that note? My first thing would be don't bite off more than you can chew. That's for sure. And if they don't be afraid to get some professional advice on things as well. If they're not very confident on valuing up the work that's involved, by basically doing if they had to have an architect in, an architect could give them a list of what needs doing sort of thing, so they could get an individual prices up if they wanted to do. But if they were going to do most of the work themselves, which I'd meet many people who are real ambitious and want to do all the work themselves besides electrics and plumbing and things, I just think nowadays with what's available on the internet, as in videos and advice and forums, I think it's certainly all possible, a lot easier, I would say, than what it was for me 10, 20, nearly 30 years ago when I was first buying properties. So I think I would advise people to still do it. There is still money to be made in there. It isn't as much as it used to be, unfortunately. I personally don't feel. Whether that's because of material prices going up, whether it's labor costs going up, whether it's more regulations that are requested on various houses and depend on what they're going to do with them at the end. So if someone's going to, jump into it and buy whether it's their first house to do up and sell, I think just getting the right advice around them, making sure that they can get the full funds in place, certainly with a little bit of a contingency plan of 10 or 15% as a backup, is definitely wise to do. And then by all means do it, and if you can save money by doing some of the labor costs yourself. I tell you how I learned a lot of my trades. I went to college when I was 18 and a half years of age and done some brickwork and various things and night school classes, then a few carpentry and plastering classes, etc., to learn them all. But I learned the most from when I had my building company as a sole trader. I would start taking on jobs way bigger than I could manage myself. And I would just employ a builder who was a lot more experienced than me. And I would agree either a daily rate with him, and I would tell him I would labor for him. So every time I had whatever skill it was, whatever type of trades I brought in, I labored on them morning, noon, and night. And I just picked up all their knowledge, all their advice. And I learned a hell of a lot myself then. So if they're going to take the challenge on, by all means, do a lot of the labor and work themselves. If they bring the specialist in to do the work, just say to them, I need to keep the costs down. I want to be your laborer and I want to support you in every way I can and learn from it. But also you are keeping the costs down, because if they're decent enough and they're genuine, whether they work on a daily rate or a fixed price or not, you're going to get it in a little bit better price wise. And when you've got to really, and believe me, when you are doing a renovation of a property at any size, you do start penny pinching towards the end, and you're looking at every opportunity to try and save a little bit here, because the unforeseen things that pop up, and they do pop up every time, you've got to have that little bit of contingency plan. So if you've made savings on the way, you've still got a little bit more there left at the end.
They say success leaves clues. When people listen to the things that you've been saying today from your journey before Big Brother, in Big Brother, and since then, you've given a huge amount of clues how to be successful in almost anything that you do. So that's really been great for sharing all the things you've done. I'm sure Jimmy probably has a couple of questions he wants to ask. I've been thoroughly entertained. I've enjoyed all the stuff you said. I'm a developer myself. I do all the things that you do, and we're singing from the same heat. So I'm sure Jimmy's got a few bits he would like to ask as well.
Yeah, that was brilliant. Craig, first of all, I want to know, where do you find 21-bedroom houses for? Because
at that price. very far and few between.
Yeah, they are now.
Yeah.
Do
you know what was funny as well? I was at the auction buying, and it's just funny because we've just put this up for sale. It's just going through at the moment. I had my target set on that big house. You know, it was the first one was a 19-room one. The second one was 21, and we rebuilt a 28-room house. But when I went to buy that one, I'd viewed it, etc., and you know, done my calculations up. And I was at the auction. And when I first arrived there must have been 500 people there, a huge big auction. And I look at this big brochure, and I don't know, let's say there was 500 houses or lots for sale. Anyway, as I was skimming through it all, waiting hours and hours went by, I realised one of them didn't have a reserve price on. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to an auction and there's a property without a reserve price on. Believe me, they're not very many of them, you know. So I thought, that's kind of strange. Anyway, I bought what I wanted. I went out and had some dinner. I come back 2 or 3 hours later, and this room of 500 people has now come down to about 12 people. And it's now about 3 pages to the end of this catalogue. So I'm waiting around. There's this one. It's a 4-story house. It's had slight fire damage. Now, I was looking at the chimney stack, and all the lead work was in place, and it had plastic windows, and none of them seemed damaged. So I'm thinking to myself, well, it isn't a severe fire because the plastic windows are in place, and there's still the lead works in place around the chimney. So whatever damage in there doesn't scare me off, you know. So I waited for this 4-story house, and it had already been converted into 4 one-bedroom flats. It was in the Bootle area of Liverpool, not the best of areas, but and I grew up around there, so I knew the area inside and out. And anyway, I waited and waited. The auctioneer said, "Oh, this 4-story house, blah blah blah, 4 self-contained flats. Let's start us off. Anyone start us off for £60,000?" Everyone's silent. £50,000. Silent. £40,000. Anyone in the room interested in this house whatsoever? There's no reserve price on it. So I went. He said, "Yes, sir." I said, £10,000. He said, "Okay, £10,000. Anyone advances on this? 10,000." Someone next to me went, 11. What? You can't do that. How can this happen? So I put my hands up again. He said 12. I said, no. 11,100. Against the guy, 11,200. He comes back to me. £11,220. I thought, I'm going to drag this out. He's not getting away with this.
Brilliant.
I bought a 4-story house for 11,000, I think 300 something. I bought it for, and I hadn't even seen it. I don't advise anyone to do this. All I looked at it was from a picture this big on this catalogue. But you know, it turned out well. Again, we got in there with the team. I think I spent about 120,000 on it, and then straight away again, Lloyd's valued it up for mortgage purposes. I think 260. That was in about 2008, I think, just before everything started to tumble a little bit. And our own one as well. I don't know if you've seen online our own house we just built.
I haven't.
Oh, please have a little look at our Mr. and Mrs. DIY website. Okay. And I've just built myself a new house there. And I bought a plot of land with planning permission for 2 5-bed houses on. And it's not often the planners get someone turn up and say, "Can I put a new application in? I don't want 2 houses in there. I want 1. And they were looking at me like it was a bit strange. So I used up the footprint of the 2 5-bedders. I linked it together, added a bit more on because I'm cheeky, and then also built a home studio as well there at the house. So where a normal house has about 4 corners, our one's got 18 corners on it. So it's cracking. I built it all myself. I got teams in helping me, of course. And we filmed the whole lot, so we haven't put it out yet. It's going to be going out on a series, just only online on our own website.
So how many square foot is the house going to be?
Square foot. Oh, I'm an old school. I do it in square meters. We're about 465 square meters. So what's that about?
So for old school, that's well over
nearly 5,000 square foot, is it?
5,000 square foot. So that's a huge house. How many bedrooms? How many bathrooms?
We've got eight bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a games room, a gym, an office, a bar, and
you've got to have a bar in there.
You've got to have a bar in there. Yeah. We've got a bar in there. Oh, yeah, and a home studio, but that's detached. That's over the other side of the garden.
So the home. Sorry, man, just back there. So the home studio means now you basically work from home. Is that right?
Yeah. It's a big workshop, but we've kitted it out with TV cameras, and I think we got 22 studio lights in there. So we do a lot of our online stuff there, where we build things and put them online, how-to videos.
Amazing. What are you building a square foot in your area now? What are you building a square foot?
I've got nothing at the moment. I'm not building any properties at this very moment. I've been trying to, we only just got this one finished, and we've moved into it about 18 months ago. And then we only just managed to finish the driveway. The driveway was 675 square meters of block pave. Yeah. So we just got all that finished off. And having 2 kids as well, under 2, that slowed me down. So all I've done property development in this last 2 years is my own house. I've done no more at the moment.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm. But I've got the bug now, I think, for these kind of super houses that are kind of one-offs, something that's not what you really see on a building site type of thing. So I think if I do any more now going forward, I would probably model them a little bit off what we've done here, because we've had so many people, and I've never experienced this before. Halfway through the build, we're having cars pull up straight away saying, "Wow, is this house for sale?" I won't even mention any names, but even Liverpool players, we've had a couple of their representatives and things pull up and say, "Is this house for sale, or is it being rented?" And I've said, no, it's a personal house of mine. And even my friend Hodgie, I mentioned earlier, at the bricklaying company, again, I lent some of his guys to come and help me build it here. And he said to me, "You'll never move in that house, Craig." He said, "I'm telling you now, when you build one-offs like that, someone will offer you money that you can't refuse." And I haven't been offered any money for it, but just people have generally asked, "Is it for sale?" And I've said point blank, no, we're going to live in it and have our children. But I know I'll get bored. And I think probably in the next 12 months, I'm already always looking around for good plots of land.
well, Jamie Carragher is massive into property.
That's right, yeah.
He advises a lot of the Liverpool players, and I'm sure with your connections, you'll be able to build a lot of houses for the Liverpool players.
I showed Jamie the plans of it actually once, but I know him, and I sat with him on a plane. Sorry, I didn't sat with him. I sat with him in the lounge, waiting to go on the plane. I was having a chat with him then, and I showed him the artist impressions of what. And straight away he was like, "That's brilliant. What's that going to cost you? How much does that cost you square footage, square meter?"
Yeah.
Just talking about apps and the way things are now with property development planning, do you use any apps in stuff that you do?
No, I haven't. I wish I could use some of the programs a little bit better, but I've always just employed architects and things to help me on the drawing side of things. I'm a bit old school fashioned. I can draw it all on paper the way I want it and how I see it and size wise, but I certainly can't use computers enough to draw it up on a computer.
Yeah, fair enough.
I wish I could.
And the last question I've got for you. So, you've got your own tools, I see, Silverline. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. How's that going? And I see that you launched them in Hyundai. That must be huge for you, right?
Yeah. The Silverline hand and power tools. We've been working with them for I've been their brand ambassador for nearly 9 years now. And what we predominantly do is make online videos. That's hence the studio at the back. And I think we've topped about 26.5 million views now on the YouTube channel for Silverline. And I think we've got 150,000 subscribers on there as well.
Well, I think it's been absolutely, such a great podcast. Some wicked information in there.
Thank you.
Immanuel, have you got any questions, or are we going to wrap this up with Craig?
No,
let him crack on to build his 21-bedroom house.
I think it's been great. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. Really enjoyed listening to your stories, and thank you for taking the time today.
My pleasure. Great. Thanks for having us. Been great to catch up with you guys. Cheers, and good luck with the pub build.
Thank you.
Don't forget, guys, search Craig Phillips. Follow him on all the socials as well. And Craig, best of luck for the future. Take care.
Cheers. Thanks very much, Jimmy. Take care, mate. Bye-bye now.